Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, we're going to be talking about skills, not nunchuck skills or bow hunting skills or computer hacking skills, but librarian skills. See what I did there? My guests and I will be riffing off of a recent report published by Technology from Sage with collaboration from SkillType called the Librarian Skills Landscape. We'll highlight and expand on many of the key takeaways from the report, but we'll also talk about real skill building initiatives happening in academic institutions. Joining me on this 4-episode series, which is brought to you with generous support from Sage, are David Erlandson, Head of Cataloging and Metadata Services at Rice University's Fondren Library, Marcy Simons, Director, Hesburgh Libraries at the University of Notre Dame, Matthew Weldon, Library Patron Consultant at Technology from Sage and an author of this report, and Tony Zanders, Founder and CEO at SkillType. In this 3rd episode of our series, we turn our attention to how institutions are implementing specific skill-building initiatives and whether information schools are meeting the demands of contemporary academic librarianship. Okay, as we start this next episode, where we'll be sort of talking about on the ground realities that sort of tie into the report findings, I want to go back to something that Marcy mentioned about the MLS degree, and it just caused me to think of, and Marcy and Tony, I'd be curious to hear what you think. You know, is library school rising to the challenge here? I mean, are they been teaching or having any focus on these soft skills, or are they recognizing sort of that change management or change readiness aspect of sort of the realities of the job market? Are you seeing anything there?
So I wrote a book that was published in 2021, and as part of that, it was about academic librarianship and the profession. And I reviewed all of the current ALA accredited programs, and for some, I was able to look back like 10 years and see if they'd made any changes. And they were very incremental. A lot of the programs I saw looked very similar than as they did previously. That's where I like to focus my own personal research on. Is we've got to the whole purpose for writing the book was I kept hearing like, yes, maybe, no, let's not do this. Do we need the MLS? I don't know. What's the profession need? Are we professionals or are we not? So I was trying to answer those questions. I wasn't able to, spoiler alert, because there are no consistency in our programs, in the library school offerings, in what we call them. Any university, college, whatever can say, you're a tenure track librarian. You are a professional librarian. We are librarians with rank and promotion. There's no consistency or pattern for how we should be recognizing those differences. And it has to start there. And if we want to continue to be considered professionals, I think we really need to focus on what schools and programs are looking like. And I'm not sure we've done a great job of that yet.
Okay. Thank you, Marcy. Tony, I don't know if SkillType goes back into sort of the educational part of it, but of the profession, but or if it, SkillType kind of starts when you're already in the library field. But I don't know if you have any perspective on that as well.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite conversation to have. It's so important, and we need to figure this conversation out for ourselves as library professionals before someone else figures it out for us. And that's not something we want. We don't want to be dictated from a CIO or a provost, or if you're a public library, a mayor's office coming and saying, we're going to use all this amazing real estate you have for another purpose because you can't figure out your value proposition. And so I think we need to be having more conversations around this. And that's just not just conversations, but action. Skill Type was started to sort of fill this gap around action because library schools, they struggled to keep up with the pace of change. I attended a Charleston conference presentation once with two professors from iSchools who walked through step by step what it takes to update a curriculum. And I counted about 12 discrete steps and votes and committees and people who had to approve adding a new course, just one course, before that course can get added to a curriculum. And this was before ChatGPT, before generative AI. Those disruptions have just accelerated the pace of change. And so we built the software platform to bring hiring managers and supervisors and the professionals themselves back into the feedback loop, because there's been a closed loop between the iSchool and the accreditation body. And if you're a hiring manager or a supervisor, you don't have a say in that feedback loop. You're a hiring manager, you understand the skills you need, what you're missing when you hire this next person. You have direct firsthand feedback on what you need to bring into your organization. And you're not consulted by the iSchool staff or the MLIS program or the accreditation bodies. It's a closed feedback loop. And we wanted to give tools to give voice to organizations themselves who are firsthand on the ground. And so the first thing libraries do when they come onto Skill Type is they describe the skills they need. And through this needs assessment, we've built a real-time body of data around what are the skills and competencies libraries need. Now, we think that iSchools have a key role in the professionalization of our field, and that's why we work with iSchools as well. Our role as a software company is to feed them the data they need to be more nimble with their curriculum development. And so, for example, the work we do at San Jose State's High School is just one example. They wanted to provide access to Skill Type to their students, to give their students more real world practical training opportunities, expose them to the Charleston conferences of the world and Ex Libris Alma trainings. And, the list goes on of things that you won't get in iSchool. But on the other hand, they also have access to this aggregate set of data on what are employers seeking from training and development. And we received an IMLS grant together with San Jose State to fund their effort of incorporating a real-time data model for their curriculum development. So you'll be seeing more about that in the future. But that's one of 63 programs in North America. And it's disheartening to acknowledge that most of them are not thinking of ways of disrupting themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of important if you don't want to be disrupted by an external or existential threat.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. That was spot on. Thank you. So Marcy and David, back to you. Just going back to your takeaways, I'm wondering whether those reflect or not, what you see happening at your own institutions, or what you've heard anecdotally from colleagues. And, Marcy, why don't we start with you on that?
Yes, I would say it does reflect what I hear anecdotally from colleagues. I will say the one thing, and I think it's because of the work we have put in here at Notre Dame into student success. So I was surprised. That is one surprise that I guess I would say I had from the report, is how many people felt like that was a concern. We are embedded with it's called Writing and Rhetoric, which is a freshman level class that all freshmen have to take. And we have many of our library faculty who teach in those courses. and are like, they came to us and said, we need your support, or we need your help. Can you partner on this? So we are right there teaching alongside, tenure track teaching faculty. And those sessions are very well, my understanding is the SIFs, they recognize our library faculty for the role they play. What we don't have is the data. Like, it's just anecdotal at this point. So we don't have an assessment or analytics process in place where we can use that and turn it into real student success stories. But anecdotally, I would say, yeah, what I'm seeing on the ground and hearing from colleagues is very similar.
Mm-hmm. David, how about you?
Yeah, there's a couple things from the report that I think are worth unpacking. One of the places I first went to, part of the survey was that a lot of the librarians had been in their current role for 10 years or beyond. And Matthew had mentioned this earlier, but I think it's maybe worth unpacking of this cycle of information professionals tend to be long-term in most roles that they fall into, right? How do you upskill when you've got people who are used to, doing things a certain way and that sort of thing? I feel like I inherited like a dynamite team. I lead a team of 11, and I think about half of them have almost one person has near on 4 decades of experience in their role, but they're still open to learning, flexibility, and trying new things and engaging with professional development. But it's tricky that whole longevity that we've got in our roles often leads to limited actual spaces within our departments for hiring new professional librarians. So I think that does indeed lead to a delay in terms of freshly graduated new skill acclimated librarians coming into the profession. So it's kind of rare to be able to get people into these roles with 30 or 40 years of experience there. One of the things that we're trying at the library is to help fund MLIS degrees. Our university has a program, but one of the challenges of that program is that there's a pretty big time delay between when you have to pay for your courses going into a program and when they'll actually fund you, which is after the semester. If you do well enough, they might give you a certain amount of funding. That's a long time for someone to be carrying. Perhaps they put it on a credit card if they can't get certain loans, yada yada yada. So we're trying out something like that to try to create a pipeline of in-house librarian development. We also benefit from that as well, because we're getting the latest and greatest from the iSchools, because we've got staff who are in these courses learning things. And of course, it doesn't help to just learn the things. You have to put it to use. So even with the rest of my staff, whether it's going to a conference or attending a webinar on like Open Refine, I'm always trying to work with them to say, hey, you've learned this skill. How can we put it to work? Is there a project that we can do some data cleaning, things like that? Yeah, and we also have a pretty big emphasis on the aspect of student success. One program that we've got is called like the Fondren Fellows, where we partner with a student and there's a little bit of funding to handle some really important library projects or library adjacent projects. So it allows the students to have some experiential learning, while also benefiting and shaping kind of how the library progresses with certain projects. So we've had students who have been involved in kind of the LC subjects and getting them more DEI aligned. We've also had some students who are interested in ensuring that we're, working on greenifying our building, and some of the work that we do is having a minimal impact on the environment. So it pairs student passions with some librarian expertise and goes about different aspects of the library overall, which I think is an interesting take for student success.
Yeah, student success factored pretty heavily in the report, and I'm curious, just sticking with you, Marcy and David, for this briefly, like if you could sort of contextualize it maybe a little bit for us. Student success has been a long time initiative, I guess, institutionally. What about it is sort of confounding librarians in terms, because one of the things about the report is that there was some area for growth here. Like, what other skills do librarians feel like they need to have within that umbrella kind of student success area?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at
Sure.
that first, I guess. So I think it's such a broad category, right? Student success for like an engineering student looks a whole lot different than someone who might be in a philosophy track, right?
Right.
So I think it ties into some of these other areas within the report. What I'm seeing, and we've got another committee for kind of data management and helping people with that, is that like, data management is becoming an increasingly large aspect of, publishing scholarly works, right? You got to have a data set associated with this, and it needs a DOI. And various funders are actually now kind of requiring like, hey, you're going to publish your data set somewhere. So having those skills are a big part of student success for a lot of the university. And that was one of the other areas where, librarians were a little less confident in their ability to answer problems.
Okay.
But I think building in students wherever you can in your library is a really important factor of this. We call it the library ambassadors, but I think other, libraries might call it a student advisory council that can both, advise us on things that the students need to succeed. But then they will also, kind of go out and champion in us across the rest of the university. So that's another aspect that's worth looking into if your library doesn't have one of those.
Okay. Marcy, anything you want to add?
Oh, I love all of your suggestions. We don't have a student advisory committee, and that's a great idea. I think the other thing related to student success that I see here is we also have a lot of longevity, especially with some of our library faculty roles. And back when they got their degrees, there wasn't a focus on teaching. So maybe they feel like their teaching skills aren't there. First of all, they may be a little introverted and not sure they want to get up in front of a group of 18 to 22-year-olds and teach them things. So helping to build on their teaching experience and expertise, I think, is also going to be key.
Excellent. Thank you. Matthew, I want to jump over to you. It's been a minute. I'd be interested to hear what you think about the finding that librarians seem to be less interested in building skills around specific vendor products than they are around emerging themes and trends. And I'm curious to see what you think might be behind that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the other quite striking findings, and it's something that when we presented at the Charleston conference last year, it certainly came through. I think now so the example, David and I have talked about this before, and I think the example that I gave then was no one's getting excited to use Excel, and David corrected me and said that actually he does get excited to use Excel. Yep. So maybe I'm in need of a slightly different
right, to each his own here.
Comparison. But to reduce it down to a really reductive level, like when I was writing the report, the thing that I was getting excited about was not using Word. It's like Word is just the means to do the thing that I'm excited about. It's not the thing that I'm getting excited about itself. So I can understand why library leaders, library directors, library administrators want to get the maximum, because they're spending, I imagine, a significant amount of money on purchasing these products to make them available to their staff. And I understand why they want to get a return on their investment through that. But the thing that's going to, from my perspective, the thing that's going to excite librarians is not necessarily getting new bits of software to play around with. It's the stuff that actually makes the tangible difference in the students' lives, that makes the library a more effective, a better place and a better resource for students. So it's not surprising to me that librarians value those skills much more than they value the products with which to put those skills into action. And I would say that actually the way to get people the way to get that return on investment in any products that you buy or subscribe to is to invest in the underlying skills that will allow librarians to make the best use of them, rather than just train them on how to use the product itself. So to my mind, that kind of accounts for that, I think.
Right. Tony, does that make sense to you as well?
It does. And going back to the vendor conversation, I started my career at Ex Libris, there for 4 years, went to EBSCO for another 4 years, and saw firsthand how often libraries change products, reevaluate products, are required to go out to RFP for certain products. And that all takes place at a much faster pace than someone's role changing. And so it makes sense that, for someone who's been in this industry for any amount of time, to want to focus on the more transferable skills, the skills that will not be sort of typecasting me, as it were, to a particular product, and more ones that allow me to be resilient as a professional. It could be the start of the fall semester and you get an email from the CIO's office saying, we're all of a sudden moving in this direction and we need mandatory training by this date for this new ERP or new system. And all of that's out of your control. And so I think that finding in the report was just an acknowledgement that we're working with colleagues who are adults, and we need to feel some sense of autonomy and self-realization with our careers, instead of being buffeted left and right by procurement processes or CIO mandates.
You just heard from David Erlandson, Head of Cataloging and Metadata Services at Rice University's Fondren Library, Marcy Simons, Director, Hesburgh Libraries at the University of Notre Dame, Matthew Weldon, Library Patron Consultant at Technology from Sage and author of the Librarian Skills Landscape Report, and Tony Zanders, founder and CEO of SkillType. This episode was brought to you with generous support from Sage. Join us next week when we challenge the idea that AI and other automated tech will replace skill sets or even jobs. We look at specific areas that are particularly critical for continued professional development and discuss best practices for support mechanisms and infrastructure that can help librarians advance in their careers. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.